All right, joining us now on the Fan Guest Hotline, powered by Gruber Law, is the one and only Mark Oldacres. You can find him on social media at Mark Oldacres, on Cheesehead TV, Packers Wire, and pretty much anywhere else on the internet that you'd like to find him. Mark, it is great to be back chatting with you. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm very good. It's nice to have some kind of football-ish. To talk about. I was really kind of. I think it was almost like a kindness of the Packers to not to do away with any kind of like idea that the preseason can be good. Like it was just right off the bat. No, it was a reminder. This is not really real football, not yet. So we still got to work a little bit till we get to that point. But no, it's good to have some real stuff to watch at least.
Preseason is for trying desperately to stay healthy and try to get some player evaluations and not a whole heck of a lot else. But speaking of staying healthy, unfortunately, Green Bay has not exactly had the easiest time of doing that, including to QB1, Jordan Love out with the thumb injury. Sounds like has the potential at least to be back next week. Is not going to play in that final preseason game or certainly do anything this week. Your thoughts on Jordan's injury when you first heard that it happened and how it could potentially affect this team, if at all?
Yeah, I think when I kind of saw the initial thing that he was at practice and had his left thumb taped, it was very much kind of, zero alarm. To be honest, I was kind of like, well, that doesn't really matter as long as it's just taped up. Obviously, you don't know the severity of it at that point, but he's practicing. Obviously, when you hear surgery, not good, but then you see kind of the explanation of what it is and that he's only going to be out, around a week or could even only miss a few practices if all goes well. So obviously they've dodged a bullet, there's no doubt about that. I think there's been a bit of a theme of that with the injuries so far that they've had this summer. Obviously the fact that he's going to miss, some of the joint practices, he's probably not going to play in the preseason at all. Maybe he'll play in the final week, but whether they want to risk that at this point, I'm not sure. There's an element of could he start the season a little bit rustier than if he was able to play in those games? So that's kind of the only minor concern. But in terms of the actual health and the most important thing is that he's going to be able to be on the field when the football counts. It's good news overall.
Yeah, I think so too. I joked about like if you had to somehow piece together the words Jordan Love, ligament and surgery, torn ligament and surgery, this is about the best possible case scenario that you could possibly have. Even if you added thumb to that, you had a 50-50 chance of it being an absolute nightmare. And thankfully, we got the right side of 50-50. So, this is hopefully much ado about nothing in the end, and he can be back next week practicing, looking good to go. He misses maybe 3-4 practices in a preseason game because of it, and that's it. And if he's back next week, he still has about 2.5 weeks to get ready for the season. It's not like he's going to forget everything that he's done already in training camp, mini camp, and OTA so far. So no real concern. My one other concern would be potentially if it affects him under center at all. If they have to go more, shotgun or pistol to begin with because it's maybe, to protect the thumb to begin with. That would be the only other thing that I'd be kind of keeping an eye on. But if that's not an issue at all, especially if it's starting week 1, then no real concern on my end. But anytime you hear, again, surgery and Jordan Love, it's not ideal, but about the best case scenario you could possibly have given the circumstances. Of course, Mark, we do have joint practices sans Jordan Love today. It'll be the Colts and the Packers practicing together in Indianapolis. I talked about it would be nice just to get some positives going this way, hopefully from an injury standpoint, and hopefully they can take it to Indianapolis a little bit and start getting some positive updates there. But what are you ultimately looking for in today's joint practices as we start getting those tweets in about, 5 hours-ish?
Yeah, it's always interesting when you have these now because obviously, we can pay attention to, the practice tweets, which obviously guys like yourself are thankfully putting out there from camp and how this player's doing against this player and kind of, how it's going for various players throughout camp. But, they are playing against themselves. They know each other very well. So there isn't always an element of kind of when you can then going to play against a different opponent in, this is as close to real football as they're really going to play because it's about the only time now with the preseason being so vanilla that the coaches are going to kind of let it rip a little bit. So you obviously want to see them, fare well against the Colts this week and against the Seahawks next week in these joint practices. Like you said, I think health is the first thing everybody's looking at. What can we get some updates on how long? Where's Wicks at? How long is he going to be out? For Dobbs with the back injury, sounds like it wasn't too bad, but they're getting pretty thin at receiver. So that's kind of the again, the first and foremost stuff is just, how are they doing on the health front. I think one thing I'm looking forward to kind of seeing on the actual football side of things, and I think it sounds like we got a glimpse of this a little bit when Malik Willis was of course QB1 with Love out at that practice the other day. How does he look when he's back with the first team offense? Because I think that does make a big difference. I don't think he's probably had the best camp. And again, it's hard to say that. Who knows what he's working on and what he's trying and things like that. But when you're working with the second team rather than the first team, there's lesser kind of talent around you. So I guess I just want to see really how can the first team offense function, especially if they are down a couple more receivers as well, against another NFL first team defense. How does Willis do in that situation? Obviously, he did pretty well against the Colts last year, but can he move the offense? And does he look more like, okay, his hands are more firmly on the reins now than he's rather than just kind of trying stuff and he's with the second team against the second team defense? Is he kind of a bit more locked in?
That's going to be, I think, an interesting thing is just how Malik, goes against this Colts team. And they haven't used the Malik Willis offense in practice the other day. It was him running the actual offense. And I thought he did a really nice job with it. So if he can do that against Indy today and then in that preseason game, I think that'll be a solid step for him. If all those receivers are out and it's Malik Willis and Golden and Hardman and Heath, good luck. That might be a little bit of a heavy lift out there, but hopefully he's capable of doing it. We get some, again, good updates out there at training camp in Indianapolis today. We're being joined by Mark Oldacres. Easy for me to say, Mark. You can find him on social media at Mark Oldacres and, of course, Cheesehead TV and PackersWire.com. We have a big super fan in our YouTube chat. It looks like we have at Mitch Nellis tweeting at us in YouTube, or at least messaging us in YouTube. What if Tyron Hopper is good, is his question. So, Mark, I'll let you take this one. What if Tyron Hopper actually comes out and plays really well this season?
Well, it'd be a big boost. I think that's kind of it's funny because Tyron Hopper being good kind of felt like, and I'm guilty of this as well, it's kind of felt like a foregone conclusion that that's not the case up until this summer, which is really harsh. Obviously, he was a surprising third round pick, and I don't think many people would have taken him there. And then last summer, obviously, he didn't really do much, and then kind of in the regular season didn't really contribute much either, particularly on defense. So he obviously does seem to have taken a big jump. Isaiah McDuffie is the third linebacker. He's kind of he's a safe pair of hands, but there's not kind of any playmaking element there. Hopper, you see kind of the flashes of that more thumping style that he plays with. He just comes downhill, and you see what the Packers saw in him. So if he can, at some point in the season, legitimately challenge McDuffie and get some looks in base defense alongside Cooper and Walker, it could just add another real strong element, especially when they're coming downhill in the run game and coverage. I think Hopper, that might always be maybe a little bit more of a challenge for him. But it's been really pleasing to see that he's taken legitimate strides, because he was kind of, I think, a bit unfairly by pretty much everybody decided that he wasn't going to work out. And it's nice to see some positives.
Yeah, I thought he had he was having a much better training camp and had a nice preseason game than anything we really saw this past year. So taking steps in the right direction. And I do wonder if he has the ability to kind of get into that number 3 linebacker conversation a little bit more. Right now, it has been primarily McDuffie and even Simmons ahead of him so far. But he's looked good, and hopefully he can get in that conversation sooner rather than later. As you look back at this preseason game 1 and Packers Jets, I know it's tough to, kind of get some takeaways from a preseason game, but there's always some good, there's always some bad. I walked through some of my highlights and lowlights from that game. What stood out to you as something that you can actually have as a tangible takeaway from that game?
Yeah, I think the biggest one was Jordan Morgan by far, for me. Just in terms of, I think what I'm looking for in these games is, obviously you're looking to see kind of who's going to make the team, who are the guys that are showing up and impressing in a way that they're going to make the team. But is there anything you can glean from what you're watching that is actually going to impact how well the Packers do in 2025? Because a lot of the back end of the roster guys aren't really going to contribute to that in a major way. Often in preseason, there's not a lot of that to draw from. But Morgan, I thought, just looked so assured. And again, it is, it's a preseason game, but you look at just kind of the progress from family night where he did struggle at times. And he just looked so confident. His footwork was so clean. he looked, I think, more stout than he had in the past, in terms of kind of dealing with power, which is something that he needed to work on. And I just think with him, for all the talk that kind of like a lot of circles, that he's going to be a guard. And this is, I've talked about this recently. I've just given up on the debate on which offensive lineman is going to play where, because there's no point. Like, there is no point trying to figure it out, because first of all, they're probably going to have a good offensive line anyway, so you don't really have to worry. And then second of all, they're just going to move guys around all the time. Zach Tom could be playing center in 2 years' time, for all I know, like, honestly, at this point. Yep. So, but Morgan, I think, was definitely the biggest takeaway for me. Just looked comfortable at left tackle, and that would be obviously a huge development for the long term if he can be an NFL left tackle and a good one.
I'm with you on all of it. It does not matter what we think of where offensive linemen should play. They're all going to play pretty much everywhere anyway. That's turned out pretty well for them, and I was very excited about how Jordan Morgan looked in that game. I joke, we've heard forever that, like, you can't just take a player and move them from one offensive line position to the other. Like, it's not like Madden, and the Packers are like, actually, it kind of is. We're just going to take anyone that we want at any given moment and move them to a different offensive line spot, and it's going to be totally fine. It's like, all right, I guess you can do that. So yeah, they're very unique in their offensive line philosophies, with switching guys around and subbing guys in mid-game and having rotations, and they're just like, whatever, we're down for whatever on the offensive line. So yeah, trying to predict what's going to come next, like you said, Zach Tom could be a center. They could be playing 7 offensive line. Who knows at this point? That's just like how they're operating at the moment. We're being joined by Mark Oldacres. You can find him on Cheesehead TV, at PackersWire.com, and on social media at Mark Oldacres. All right, a couple other quick ones before we get you out of here. There's some really fun and exciting young players on this offense in particular. Matthew Golden, Marshawn Lloyd, Savion Williams, even Luke Musgrave. I would kind of put it, like, what I would kind of say is like our unique and exciting, but still sort of unknown type players. So I'm going to put those 4 players in that category. Who are you kind of most excited about to watch throughout the course of this season, preseason and regular season, and hoping that, like, really kind of explodes off the page and catches here? I mean, I get the easy one is Matthew Golden. He's the first round pick, but, you know, kind of maybe I'll have you rank them from 1 to 4. Musgrave, Lloyd, Savion Williams, and Matthew Golden.
I'll put Golden at 1 as kind of the obvious one. Fair. And then number 2, I would go Savion, because I was a big, having watched his tape after they drafted him, a much bigger fan.
So fun.
Of the short amount of tape I watched before they drafted him. And it's been good to see that he's kind of been, you know, he kind of started behind the 8 ball a little bit with some injuries and stuff, but it's good to see at practice, at least he's been working with the ones at times and making some plays. I'm just so fascinated to see what he could be. Then I'd probably put Lloyd 3rd, just because it's more intrigue, again, because of kind of the stuff coming out of camp about how electric he looks at times. And he's just that kind of runner. He's the kind of runner who's going to reverse field and try and run it 50 yards back the wrong way, essentially. And he's capable of doing that. So can they work him in? What does that mean for Jacob? Stuff like that. And then I'd probably put Musgrave last, just because I kind of feel like I know what Musgrave's going to be. He's going to be stretching the seam and adding that vertical element to the tight ends, but I don't think he's ever going to kind of surpass Kraft at this point. And I kind of question how big of a role he's going to have ultimately.
Yeah, I would put that in the same exact. I might switch up Lloyd and Savion, although I love Savion, and I'm unrealistically excited about his potential long term. Like, if you told me he was the best player from this draft class for Green Bay, wouldn't be stunned one bit. Like, he has that type of talent. And Golden already looks incredible too. So just even saying that is something in and of itself. But yeah, it's a really interesting group of fun, unique players, and hopefully we can kind of see more of them here. Just a little bit more of substance out of them, and not just a flash here or there. All right, Mark, the big one before I get you out of here. I'm doing this for myself and for Mason Crosby, and us two in particular. We've got Premier League starting tomorrow. My Liverpool defending their championship starting tomorrow on Friday, and then we get 4 straight days of soccer. It is back, or football for you. My apologies. What are you looking forward to? Who's your team? Is it you West Ham, or what's your team?
Aston Villa is my team. So
Aston Villa, that's right.
Same colours as West Ham. Aston Villa, yeah. I'm looking forward to it, but I actually work kind of in that realm, kind of in the broadcasting side. So this does mean that after a lot of time off, that means I'm now back to work. So that's kind of it's pros and cons, but no, I'm looking forward to the season. I think there's a lot of really exciting players that are coming into the league this year. Liverpool obviously have made a lot of changes, so I'm interested to see how they kind of cope with that. Obviously, you just win the league and then you change a lot of things around, so we'll see how that goes. From a Villa perspective, we've been a little bit quiet transfer-wise. We've got some of this financial, tomfoolery that we have to do to get around all these regulations and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be an interesting year for us, but I know we're always kind of going to be up there with the manager that we've got and everything like that. So I think it's going to be a really, really interesting season this year.
Who wins the league? Who's your preseason prediction?
I'll go Arsenal this year. I think they'll finally do it.
I think that might seem right, but hopefully you're wrong, and hopefully it's Liverpool, to say the least. Mark, we may have just lost you there for a second, but either way, a huge thank you to Mark for joining us on the Fan Guest Hotline, powered by Gruber Law. One call, that's all. Make sure to find him on social media at Mark Oldacres. This is the Pack-A-Day Radio Show. We'll be right back with more Packers chat right after this.